I was scraping dried mud off the grooves of a 7-iron with an old toothbrush when I heard it, a low, rhythmic buzzing sound that wasn't supposed to be there, coming from the deepest side pocket of a golf bag that cost more than my first car. I stopped scrubbing. The house was quiet, just the distant sound of the shower running upstairs where my husband, David, was washing off what he called a grueling day on the links, and that buzzing sound felt like a warning siren cutting through the peace of my Sunday afternoon. I froze, holding that iron in mid-air, because I knew for a fact that David's phone, his titanium iPhone with the cracked screen protector, was sitting on the wireless charger in the kitchen, lighting up every few minutes with ESPN notifications. So what, exactly, was vibrating inside his golf bag at 1600 hours on a Sunday? I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of betrayal from. I want to know how far it's traveled. To understand why this moment broke me, you have to understand who I am. My name is Renee Thompson, but everyone calls me Nay. I am 54 years old, and I am the founder and CEO of Thompson Logistics. I started with one beat-up cargo van and a map of the city, and I turned it into a fleet of 50 trucks that move freight across the entire tri-state area. I am a woman who built her kingdom with sweat, grit, and a refusal to take no for an answer. I handle the finances, I handle the crises, and I handle the household. David handles the social calendar. He retired 10 years ago when the business really took off, saying he wanted to manage our investments, which I quickly learned was code for playing 18 holes 4 times a week and drinking scotch with men who admired the car I bought him. I didn't mind. I loved him. I loved providing for him. I thought we were partners, even if I was the one carrying the heavy load. I thought that was just what you did when you made it. You took care of your own. But as I stood there in the mudroom, staring at that black leather golf bag with his initials monogrammed in gold thread, the air in the room felt suddenly thin. I put the club down. I wiped my hands on a rag. I walked over to the bag. The buzzing had stopped, but the silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the secret I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I reached into the main pocket. Nothing but balls and tees. I reached into the thermal pocket, the one meant to keep drinks cold. My fingers brushed against something hard and plastic buried under a rain poncho. I pulled it out. It wasn't a flask. It wasn't a rangefinder. It was a phone. A cheap, black, prepaid Android smartphone. The kind you buy at a gas station when you don't want to be traced. The kind drug dealers use in movies. The plastic felt greasy in my hand. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that echoed the blood rushing in my ears. Why does my husband, a man who complains if the Wi-Fi is slow, have a burner phone hidden in his golf bag? I pressed the side button. The screen lit up, and the air left my lungs so fast I actually staggered back against the washing machine. It wasn't the time or the date that killed me. It was the wallpaper. It was a high-resolution photo, bright and clear. It was a photo of a woman holding a baby boy, maybe a year old, kissing his chubby cheek with a look of pure adoration. I knew that woman. I knew the curve of her jaw, the way she did her eyeliner, the specific shade of honey blonde highlights in her hair. It was Linda. My best friend. My sister in everything but blood. Linda, who I had known for 20 years. Linda, who I had supported through 2 divorces, 3 layoffs, and 1,000 crying sessions on my couch. Linda, who told me she couldn't come to brunch today because she had a migraine. And the baby? The baby wasn't just any baby. He had David's nose. He had David's chin. He had the same little dimple in his left cheek that I had kissed a million times. I stared at that screen until the light timed out and went black, leaving me staring at my own shocked reflection. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I pressed the button again. I needed to get in. I swiped up. Enter PIN. I typed in my birthday, incorrect. I typed in our anniversary, incorrect. I typed in the last 4 digits of his social security number, incorrect. I closed my eyes. I thought about Linda. I thought about the birthday party I threw for her last year, the one where I paid for the catering and the DJ. I typed in her birthday. The screen unlocked. It opened to the home screen, cluttered with apps for baby monitors and doorbells. But I didn't care about the apps. I cared about the little green bubble at the bottom with the red one on it. Messages. My thumb hovered over the icon. I knew that once I tapped it, my life as I knew it was over. The Renee who trusted her husband, the Renee who loved her best friend, she was going to die in this mudroom. But I had to know. I tapped the icon. The most recent thread was at the top. The contact name wasn't Linda. It was saved as wifey number 2 with a heart emoji. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I opened the thread. The text that had caused the vibration, the text that had summoned me to this moment, was sitting right there in a gray bubble. It was sent at 16:02. It read, "Did you get away from the ATM yet? We need milk and diapers. And you promised you'd fix the sink at the condo tonight. Don't leave me hanging." The ATM. She called me the ATM. I read it again. "Did you get away from the ATM yet?" I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone against the wall. I went cold. Ice cold. It was a coldness I hadn't felt since I negotiated my first hostile takeover. They were laughing at me. All this time, while I was working late, while I was signing the checks, while I was worrying about his cholesterol and her loneliness, they were laughing at me. I was just the bank. I was just the resource they mined to build their little secret family. I scrolled up. I shouldn't have, but I did. I saw pictures. Pictures of them at the beach, a trip he told me was a golf retreat. Pictures of them in a nursery I paid for. Pictures of the baby wearing clothes I probably bought, thinking they were for a charity drive. I saw Cash App notification screenshot and sent in the chat. $500 for rent. $2,000 for utilities. $600 for pediatrician. I matched the dates in my head. That $500. That was the day I transferred money to David for car repairs. That $2,000. That was the assessment fee for the country club he claimed they charged everyone. I was funding my own betrayal. I was financing the destruction of my own marriage. Upstairs, the water turned off. The pipes groaned. He was getting out of the shower. He would be drying off, putting on his robe, coming downstairs expecting a cold beer and a clean set of clubs. He would expect the ATM to be in the kitchen, cooking his dinner. I looked at the phone one last time. I memorized the baby's face. I memorized the timestamp, 16:02. Then, I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I backed out of the messages. I locked the screen. I wiped my fingerprints off the glass with the hem of my shirt. I put the phone back into the thermal pocket, tucked exactly under the rain poncho where I found it. I zipped the pocket shut. I picked up the 7-iron and the toothbrush. I started scrubbing again. My movements were mechanical, robotic. Scrub, scrub, scrub. I needed him to find me exactly where he left me. I needed him to think nothing had changed. Because if I confronted him now, if I ran upstairs screaming and crying, he would lie. He would gaslight me. He would delete the texts and claim I was crazy. He would protect his assets. And Linda. She would play the victim. She would say it was a mistake. No. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of my tears. Not yet. I was going to give them something else. I was going to give them the rope to hang themselves. I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. "Nay?" He called out, his voice smooth and relaxed, the voice of a man without a care in the world. "You down there, babe?" "I'm here, David," I called back. My voice didn't shake. It sounded normal. It sounded like the wife he thought he had fooled. "Just cleaning your clubs. You got them real dirty today." "You're the best," he said, walking into the mudroom. He smelled of my expensive body wash. He kissed me on the cheek. "I don't deserve you." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared my bed with for 25 years. I looked at the father of my non-existent children. And I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile, but he didn't notice. "No, David," I said, placing the clean iron back in the bag, right next to the secret that was going to bury him. "You really don't." I walked out of the mudroom and into the kitchen, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs like a war drum. David was already settled in his favorite leather recliner in the den, a fresh beer in his hand, the television tuned to the post-game analysis of some tournament I didn't care about. He looked up and smiled at me, that easy, charming smile that had convinced me to marry him 25 years ago, that smile that I now realized was nothing more than a mask painted over a hollow man. He asked me what was for dinner, his voice casual, entitled, expecting the Sunday roast I had been making for 2 decades. I told him I needed to take a shower first, that I felt grimy from the garage. He nodded, taking a sip of his drink, already turning his attention back to the screen. He didn't even look at me. Why would he? I was just the furniture. I was just the appliance that kept his life running smooth and cold. I walked up the grand staircase of the home I built. Every step was a reminder of what I had sacrificed. The custom wrought iron railing. That was 3 years of missed vacations. The chandelier. That was the bonus I didn't take so I could pay my drivers more. I reached the master bedroom, walked into the ensuite bathroom, and locked the door. I turned the shower on, cranking the heat up until steam started to fog the mirrors. I needed the noise. I needed the white noise of the rushing water to cover the sound of my world collapsing, and more importantly, to cover the silence of me plotting his destruction. I sat down on the cold tile floor, leaning my back against the bathtub. My legs felt like they couldn't hold me up anymore. I pulled my own phone out of my pocket. In the mudroom, in those few terrifying seconds before I heard his footsteps, I had done what any good CEO does when faced with a discrepancy in the books. I had documented the evidence. I had snapped photos of the text thread on that burner phone. I had captured the dates, the amounts, the emojis, the betrayal. Now, sitting on the floor of my bathroom, I opened my photo gallery. I looked at the first screenshot. It was dated 3 years ago. A text from wifey number 2, Linda. My rent is due. He's going to kick me out, please. And then, a screenshot of a Cash App confirmation for $2,000 sent from an account I didn't recognize, followed by David's reply, handled. Tell him you're good. I switched apps. I opened my Chase private client banking portal. I scrolled back 3 years. I found the date. October 14th. There it was. A withdrawal of $2,000 from our joint checking account. The memo line read, car repairs, transmission. I remembered that day. David had come home looking stressed, wiping grease off his hands, grease he probably put there himself, telling me the Mercedes had thrown a rod or dropped a gear or whatever lie he thought I would believe. I hadn't questioned him. I had just transferred the money to cover the difference. I thought I was paying a mechanic. I was paying Linda's rent. I went to the next screenshot. 2 years ago. A picture of a positive pregnancy test. No words, just the image. Then David's reply, we'll figure it out. Don't worry. I got you. Then, a week later, a transfer for $5,000. I checked my bank statement for that week. There was a withdrawal for $5,000. The memo, country club assessment fee, course renovation. I felt a bile rise in my throat. I remembered that week vividly. I had been working double shifts to secure the contract with the regional hospital network. I was exhausted. I came home late, and David had made me tea, rubbed my shoulders, and told me how proud he was of me. And then, over breakfast, he had slid that invoice across the table, looking so apologetic. Honey, the club is hitting us with a special assessment for the new greens. It's steep. I had signed the check without blinking. I thought I was investing in his happiness, in his hobby. I was investing in his mistress. I was paying for the prenatal care of the child he created with my best friend. The ledger of lies kept growing as I scrolled. Every business trip he took was a weekend at the condo. Every bad investment he cried about was a nursery furniture set or a stroller. I saw a transfer for $600 on the day the baby was born. Hospital copay, the text said. On my bank statement. Emergency vet bill, dog swallowed a sock. We didn't even have a dog anymore, ours had died the year before. He told me he hit a stray and felt obligated to pay for it. I had comforted him. I had held him while he cried fake tears for an imaginary dog, while he was actually celebrating the birth of his son. But the worst part wasn't the money. I have money. I can make more money. The worst part was the emotional embezzlement. I thought about Linda. Linda, who I had known since we were answering phones at a call center in our 20s. Linda, who sat at my kitchen table and cried into her wine about how hard it was to be single, how all the men she met were trash. I remembered the day she told me she was pregnant. She came over to this house, sat on my sofa, and wept. She told me the father was a married man, a powerful executive who couldn't leave his wife because of a prenup. She said he was trapped. She said he loved her, but his wife was a cold, controlling witch who controlled all the assets. I froze on the bathroom floor. She was talking about me. I had sat there, holding her hand, handing her tissues, listening to her describe me as the villain in her love story. I had comforted the woman who was sleeping with my husband. I had told her, "Girl, you don't need him. You have me. We'll raise this baby together." And we did. I threw the baby shower. I paid for the catering. I bought the crib. I bought the little blue onesies. I held that baby, DJ, in my arms when he was 3 days old. I looked into his eyes, David's eyes, and I told him his Auntie Nay would always protect him. I looked at the photo of DJ on the lock screen again. David Jr., it was so obvious. How had I been so blind? Because I trusted them. Because I thought I was the strong one, the provider, the matriarch. I thought they looked up to me. But they didn't look up to me. They looked at me like a resource. Like a vein of gold to be mined until it ran dry. The ATM. That's what she called me. Not Renee. Not Nay. Not her best friend. The ATM. I stood up. The steam had turned the bathroom into a sauna, but I was shivering. I looked at myself in the fogged-up mirror. I wiped the circle clean with my hand. The woman staring back at me didn't look like a victim. She looked like a CEO who had just discovered a massive internal theft ring. I wasn't going to cry anymore. Crying is for people who are helpless. I wasn't helpless. I was the bank. And the bank was about to foreclose. I turned off the shower. I got dressed in a fresh set of loungewear, silk, expensive, the kind David liked to see me in because it signaled that I was off the clock. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked out. I walked down the stairs. I could hear the TV still blaring. I walked into the kitchen. I started pulling pots and pans out of the cabinets. I banged them around a little more than necessary. "Everything okay in there?" David called out from the den. "Just fine," I called back, my voice steady, smooth, and lethal. "Just getting started on dinner. Linda is coming over, remember?" "Oh, right," David said. I heard the recliner snap shut. He walked into the kitchen. He looked relaxed, refreshed. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You're a saint, you know that? Cooking on your day off. Hosting Linda and the kid. You do too much for people, Nay." He kissed my neck. I held a butcher knife in my hand, chopping carrots. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the blade against the wood was the only sound I focused on. "I do what I have to do," I said, leaning back into him, letting him think he was safe. "Linda needs us. That baby needs a father figure. And since his daddy ran off, I guess you're the next best thing." I felt him tense up. Just for a fraction of a second. A tiny hitch in his breath. "Yeah," he said, pulling away and walking to the fridge to get another beer. "I guess I am. Poor kid. It's a shame, really. Some men just don't know what they have." "No," I said, turning to look at him, a smile plastered on my face that didn't reach my eyes. "Some men really don't. But don't worry, David. Everyone gets what they deserve in the end. I truly believe that." He smiled back, oblivious. He raised his bottle in a toast. "To getting what we deserve." "To the ledger," I whispered as he walked back to the den. I turned back to the stove. I had a dinner to cook. I had a performance to give. Linda was coming at 18:30. She was bringing the baby. And I was going to welcome them into my home, feed them my food, and watch them lie to my face. I was going to let them think they were getting away with it for just a little bit longer. Because when I finally pulled the rug out, I didn't want them to just trip. I wanted them to fall into a hole so deep they would never climb out. I added a little extra pepper to the pot roast. It was going to be a spicy night. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30, precise as a Swiss watch, which was funny because Linda was famously late for everything in her life except, apparently, dinner at my house. I was just pulling the pot roast out of the oven, the heavy ceramic dish radiating heat against my apron, when I heard David's footsteps thunder down the hallway. He was moving fast, faster than I'd seen him move for anything that didn't involve a tea time. Usually, he'd yell from the recliner, "Nay, can you get that?" But tonight he was practically sprinting to the door. I set the roast down on the trivet, took a deep breath of the savory steam, thyme, rosemary, and the metallic tang of my own adrenaline, and turned to follow him. I needed to see his face when he opened that door. I needed to see the mask slip, just for a second. I stood in the archway of the dining room, half hidden by the shadows, watching. David threw the door open, and there she was, Linda. My best friend. She was wearing a pair of distressed jeans and a loose, oversized sweater that kept sliding off one shoulder, an outfit that screamed effortlessly chaotic single mom. She had a diaper bag slung over one shoulder that looked heavy enough to break her back, and in her arms, she held DJ. The baby was fussing, his little face scrunched up in red, letting out those short, sharp cries that usually mean hunger or a wet diaper. "Hey!" David said, his voice pitching up an octave, breathless. "Let me get that." He didn't reach for the heavy diaper bag like a polite host. He reached for the baby. He scooped DJ out of Linda's arms with a practiced ease that made my stomach turn over. It wasn't the awkward, stiff-armed hold of a man who tolerates his wife's friend's kid. It was natural. He settled the boy onto his hip, bouncing him gently, murmuring something low and soothing that I couldn't quite catch. DJ stopped crying almost instantly, resting his little head on David's shoulder, his tiny hand clutching the collar of David's polo shirt. It was a beautiful picture. A father and his son. And it made me want to burn the house down. "Oh, thank God," Linda sighed, shaking her hair out and stepping inside. She looked exhausted, but underneath the fatigue, I saw the spark in her eyes when she looked at him. "He's been a terror all day. I think he's teething. I haven't sat down since 6 this morning." "Well, you can sit down now," David said, smiling at her with a warmth he hadn't shown me in years. "Nay's got dinner ready. I'll take the little guy. Go get a drink." "Nay," Linda called out, spotting me in the archway. She walked over and gave me a hug. She smelled like baby powder and that expensive vanilla perfume I had bought her for Christmas. "Girl, you look amazing. Is that silk? You are always so put together. I feel like a train wreck." I hugged her back. I felt the bones in her back, the beat of her heart against mine. I wondered if her heart beat faster when she lied to my face, or if she was so used to it that it just felt like a normal rhythm now. "You look fine, Lynn," I said, pulling away and smoothing my expression into a mask of welcoming concern. "Just tired. Being a single mom is hard work." "Tell me about it," she groaned, following me into the kitchen. "Especially when the dad is, well, you know, absent." I handed her a glass of Pinot Grigio. I poured it generous, right up to the rim. I wanted her loose. "Absent?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "I thought you said he was trying to be more involved. Didn't he pay for that nursery set?" Linda froze for a microsecond, the glass halfway to her lips. Her eyes darted to the living room where David was cooing at the baby. "Oh, yeah. I mean, financially, he tries, sometimes. But he's not there, you know? He's always working. Or with her." She took a giant gulp of wine. "Anyway, I don't want to talk about him. Tonight is about us. Family dinner." Family. The word tasted like poison. "Right," I said, "family." We moved to the dining room. I watched them like a hawk disguised as a dove. David set up the high chair, the one I bought, with an efficiency that betrayed him. He knew exactly how the straps worked. He knew where the little tray snapped in. He didn't fumble. He strapped DJ in, handed him a teething ring from the diaper bag without even asking Linda where it was, and then sat down at his usual spot at the head of the table. Linda sat to his right. I sat to his left. The triangle of deception. I served the roast. The beef was tender, falling apart at the touch of a fork, the carrots glazed and sweet. It was a meal made with love, served with hate. This is incredible, nay, David said with his mouth full. You really outdid yourself. Linda, you gotta try the potatoes. Linda moaned, closing her eyes. Renee, you need to quit that shipping business and open a restaurant. I swear, I'd eat here every day if I could. You practically do, I said with a light laugh, keeping it playful. So, David said, wiping his mouth. How's business? You've been working late a lot this week. Everything okay with the fleet? This was his routine. He asked about the business not because he cared about logistics or supply chains, but because he wanted to know the bottom line. He wanted to know if the golden goose was still laying eggs. I took a slow sip of my water. I set the glass down with a deliberate clink. Actually, I said, looking from him to Linda and back again. That's something I wanted to talk to you both about. Since we're all family here. The air in the room shifted. David stopped chewing. Linda's fork hovered over her plate. They sensed it, the predator sensing a shift in the wind. What's up? David asked, trying to sound casual, but I saw his hand tighten around his fork. Trouble with the union again? No, I said. The union is fine. It's the overhead. I've been going over the books, looking at our quarterly projections. And honestly, we're bleeding cash. Bleeding? David frowned. I thought we had a record quarter. Revenue is up, I lied. But expenses are out of control. Inflation, fuel costs, insurance premiums. It's eating into the margins. And I realized, if I want to keep the company healthy, I need to make some serious cuts. Personal cuts. I watched them. Linda put her fork down. She looked at David. David looked at me, a flicker of panic starting to ignite behind his eyes. What kind of cuts? He asked. Well, I said, leaning back in my chair. I'm looking at our household expenses. We spend a fortune, David. And a lot of it is frivolous? He laughed nervously. Come on, Nay. We live comfortably, sure, but we aren't buying yachts. No, I agreed. But we are paying $25,000 a year for a country club membership you use to drink beer and play a game you can play at the municipal course for $40. David's face went pale. The country club was his office. It was his identity. It was where he met Linda for lunch. The club is important for networking, he stammered. I make contacts there. For the business. You haven't brought in a contract in 10 years, David, I said softly. Let's be honest. It's a playground. And right now, I can't afford a playground. I'm thinking of canceling the membership. Effective next month. I didn't look at David. I looked at Linda. Her eyes were wide, terrified. She knew what the club meant. It was their sanctuary. It was where they pretended to be a couple in public, hidden away in the members-only lounge. And, I continued, twisting the knife, I'm looking at our charitable giving. I realized I've been very generous with people. Helping friends out. Covering emergencies. It adds up. Thousands of dollars a month bleeding out to people who aren't even on the payroll. Linda choked on her wine. She started coughing, grabbing a napkin, her face turning blotchy and red. You okay? David asked, half rising from his chair to pat her back, his hand lingering on her shoulder a second too long. I'm fine, she wheezed, waving him off. She looked at me, her eyes watery. Wow, Renee. That sounds drastic. Are things really that bad? They aren't bad, I said. They just need correction. I've been carrying a lot of dead weight, Linda. Financial dead weight. And I'm tired. My back hurts from carrying people who should be walking on their own. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was DJ babbling in his high chair, banging his plastic spoon against the tray. He looked at David and laughed. David looked at the baby, and for a second, I saw pure devastation on his face. He was doing the math. No club. No allowance for charity. No slush fund. How was he going to pay for the apartment? How was he going to pay for the diapers? You can't just cancel the club, nay, David said, his voice tight. There's a waiting list to get back in. It's prestigious. It reflects on you. My bank balance reflects on me, I countered. And right now, my bank balance tells me I'm being taken advantage of. By vendors. By consultants. I stared right at him. I'm auditing everything, David. I hired a forensic accountant yesterday. He's going through the last 5 years of statements. Personal and business. He says he's already found some irregularities. That was the kill shot. David dropped his fork. It clattered loudly onto his china plate. A forensic accountant? Why would you do that without telling me? I handle the household investments. And that's why I'm worried, I said calmly. If there are irregularities, David, I know you'd want me to find them, unless there's something you don't want me to find. He stared at me. He looked like a deer in headlights, if the deer was wearing a Ralph Lauren polo and hiding a secret family. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Linda stood up abruptly. I should go, she said, her voice shaking. DJ is getting fussy. I don't want him to ruin your dinner. He's not ruining anything, I said, smiling at her. He's the only honest thing in this room. But if you have to go, you have to go. Yeah, David said, standing up too fast. I'll walk you to the car. Help you with the bag. No need, I said. I'll walk her out. You sit down, David. Finish your roast. You look like you need your strength. I stood up and walked over to the high chair. I unbuckled DJ. I lifted him into my arms. He felt heavy, solid. He smelled like milk and innocence. I looked at his face, David's face, and I felt a surge of grief so strong it almost knocked me over. But I swallowed it. Come on, Lynn, I said. Let's get you home. You look like you've seen a ghost. I walked her to the door. She didn't say a word. She was trembling. I handed her the baby. Drive safe, I said. And Linda. She looked back at me, fear in her eyes. Don't worry about the expenses, I said. I'm sure the baby's father will step up. If he loves you, he'll find a way to provide, right? She swallowed hard. Yeah, right. She hurried to her car, buckling DJ in with frantic movements. I stood on the porch and watched her drive away. I walked back inside. David was still sitting at the table, staring at his plate. He looked up when I entered. He looked terrified. Nay, he started. About the accountant. Eat your dinner, David, I said, picking up my wineglass. We can talk about the audit later. Tonight, I just want to enjoy the peace and quiet. It's going to be a busy week. I took a sip of wine. It tasted sweet. The trap was set. The panic had begun. Now, all I had to do was wait for him to make a move. And I knew exactly where he would go. He would go to the one place he thought I didn't know about. He would go to the leak. And I would be right behind him. The 3 days following that Sunday dinner were a masterclass in panic management. David was vibrating with anxiety, pacing the floors of our home like a caged animal, constantly checking his phone, jumping every time I walked into a room. He knew the walls were closing in. He knew the forensic accountant was coming, or at least, he thought he was, and he knew that his house of cards was built on a foundation of my money that was about to disappear. So I wasn't surprised when, on Wednesday morning, he came into the kitchen while I was drinking my coffee and announced he had to leave. Nay, he said, pouring himself a juice with a hand that wasn't quite steady. I completely forgot. The Founders Invitational is this weekend. In Myrtle Beach. The guys are counting on me. It's a 3-day tournament. I have to leave this afternoon to make the tea time tomorrow morning. I looked at him over the rim of my mug. The Founders Invitational. It sounded impressive. It sounded legitimate. 10 years ago, I would have packed his bag for him. I would have kissed him goodbye and told him to hit them straight. I would have enjoyed the quiet weekend alone. But today I saw it for what it was. It was an escape plan. He needed to get out of the house to coordinate with Linda. He needed to scramble. He needed to hide the assets before I found them. That sounds fun, David, I said, keeping my voice light and breezy. You deserve a break. All this stress about the budget cuts. It's taking a toll on you. Go. Play golf. Relax. He looked relieved. He thought I bought it. He thought the old Renee, the gullible ATM, was still in charge. Thanks, babe, he said, kissing the top of my head. You're the best. I'll be back Sunday night. I watched him pack. He packed his golf clubs, of course. But he also packed a lot of regular clothes. More than he would need for a few rounds of golf. He packed his nice watch. He packed the cashmere sweaters I bought him. He looked like he was packing for a relocation, not a vacation. When he carried his golf bag out to the car, his Mercedes, the one I paid the lease on, I stood by the window and watched. He threw the bag into the trunk with a little too much force. He looked back at the house once, a guilty, fearful glance, before getting into the driver's seat. He thought he was free. He thought he was heading to Myrtle Beach to hide out. But he forgot one thing. I run a logistics company. I track 500 trucks across 3 states every single day. I know where every package, every pallet, and every driver is at any given second. Did he really think I wouldn't track my own husband? While he was in the shower that morning, I had slipped a GPS tracker, a small, magnetic device we use for high-value cargo, into the lining of his trunk. It was smaller than a matchbox. He would never find it. I waited until he pulled out of the driveway. I waited 10 minutes. Then I opened my laptop. I pulled up the fleet management software. I entered the tracker ID. A little green dot appeared on the map. I watched him drive. He got on the interstate. He headed south. Toward the airport. Toward the highway to Myrtle Beach? No. He drove for 20 minutes and then he took the exit for the west side. The west side wasn't a golf destination. It was a gentrified neighborhood of condos and townhomes, the kind of place where young professionals and divorced dads lived. The dot kept moving. It wove through the streets until it stopped at a complex called the Vistas. I knew the Vistas. It was a nice development, secure, gated, expensive. The dot stopped moving. It sat there, blinking in the parking lot of Building C. I sat back in my chair. Myrtle Beach, my foot. He wasn't going to a tournament. He was going home. He was going to his other life. I picked up the phone. I didn't call David. I called Sheldon, my corporate attorney. Sheldon has been with me since I had one truck and a dream. He knows where all the bodies are buried because he helped me dig the holes. Sheldon, I said. I need you to run a property search. Right now. Sure, nay. What's the address? The Vistas. Building C. Find out who owns unit. I zoomed in on the map. Looks like unit 402. The corner unit with the balcony. Hold on, Sheldon typed. I could hear the keys clicking. Okay, pulling up the deed. Interesting. What? Who owns it? Is it Linda? No, Sheldon said slowly. It's an LLC. R&D Holdings. R&D Holdings. Renee and David. My blood ran cold. Sheldon, look at the articles of incorporation for R&D Holdings. Who are the signatories? 1 second. Okay, here it is. Managing Partner, David Thompson. Silent Partner, Renee Thompson. I gasped. The room spun. He hadn't just bought a condo for his mistress. He had bought it in my name. He had used my credit, my financial standing, and probably forged my signature to set up a shell company so he could buy a love nest using our joint assets. Technically, legally, I owned that condo. I was the landlord of the apartment where my husband was playing house with my best friend. The audacity was so staggering I almost respected it. Almost. So, I own it? I asked, my voice shaking. Technically, the LLC owns it, Sheldon said. But since you're the majority shareholder of the funding source, yes. You own it. Why? Did you forget you bought a condo? No, Sheldon, I said, a dark plan forming in my mind. David bought it. As a surprise investment property. I wanted to check up on our investment. Since I'm auditing the books. Well, Everything looks legal, Sheldon said. Taxes are paid. HOA is current. It's a solid asset. Thank you, Sheldon. I hung up. I owned the apartment. That meant I had rights. That meant I could enter the premises to inspect my property. I waited. I watched the green dot on the screen. For 3 hours, it stayed still. He was inside. Probably unpacking. Probably kissing Linda. Probably holding DJ. Then, at 1700 hours, the dot moved. It left the parking lot. It went down the street to the grocery store. He was getting the milk and diapers. This was my window. I grabbed my purse. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the spare key ring David kept in his home office desk, the one labeled storage unit that I had never bothered to check because I trusted him. I bet my life that storage unit opened the door to Unit 402. I drove to the Vistas. It was only 20 minutes away. I parked 2 buildings over, just in case he came back early. I walked to Building C. My heart was pounding, but my head was clear. I wasn't a wife catching a cheater. I was a landlord inspecting a unit. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled of carpet cleaner and other people's dinners. I walked to Unit 402. I stood in front of the door. I pulled out the key labeled storage. My hand trembled as I slid it into the lock. It fit. I turned it. Click. The door swung open. I stepped inside, and the breath left my body in a rush. I expected a bachelor pad. I expected a messy, temporary space. I expected to see Linda's stuff. But I didn't expect to see my stuff. The living room was furnished with a beige sectional sofa. I recognized that sofa. It was the one we had in our den 5 years ago. David told me the movers had damaged it when we renovated the floors and that he had donated it to charity. He hadn't donated it. He had moved it here. I walked further in. The coffee table. The lamp. The rug. It was all my old furniture. The furniture I thought was gone. He had furnished his mistress's apartment with my cast-offs. He had built a second life out of the scraps of our first one. But that wasn't the worst of it. I walked into the bedroom. The bed was unmade. Linda's silk robe, the one I paid for, was thrown over a chair. And there, folded at the foot of the bed, was a quilt. A patchwork quilt made of worn, soft cotton squares. Blues and yellows. My grandmother's quilt. My grandmother, Big Mama, had made that quilt for me when I went to college. It was the only thing I had left of her. It had disappeared 2 years ago. David told me the dry cleaners had lost it. He held me while I cried about losing that piece of my history. He cursed the dry cleaners. He threatened to sue them. And all the while, he had stolen it. He had stolen my grandmother's quilt, the quilt she stitched with her arthritis-ridden hands, to keep his mistress warm. I reached out and touched it. It felt like betrayal. It felt like hate. I grabbed the quilt. I hugged it to my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the place down. But I couldn't. Not yet. I looked at the walls. They were covered in photos. Framed photos. Professional family portraits. David, Linda, and DJ. They were wearing matching outfits. White shirts and jeans. Walking on a beach. David lifting DJ into the air. Linda laughing, her head thrown back, looking at David with pure adoration. They looked happy. They looked complete. They looked like a family. And I realized, standing there in the silence of Unit 402, that this wasn't just an affair. This wasn't a fling. This was a replacement. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had replaced me. He had built an entire parallel existence where he was the hero, the provider, the father, and I was just the silent partner. The ghost who signed the checks. I walked over to the mantel. There was a birthday card standing there. Happy birthday to the best daddy in the world. Love, DJ. And next to it, a receipt from a jewelry store. I picked it up. A diamond tennis bracelet. $3,000. Purchased last week. I looked at my own wrist, bare. I hadn't gotten a birthday gift from David in 3 years. He said we were too old for gifts and that saving for retirement was the best gift. I pocketed the receipt. I folded the quilt and tucked it under my arm. I wasn't leaving it here. Not for one more second. I took out my phone. I took pictures of everything. The sofa. The photos. The receipt. The clothes in the closet that I had bought for him. I was shaking with a rage so pure it felt spiritual. I wasn't sad anymore. Sadness is for people who have lost something. I hadn't lost anything. I had found something. I had found the truth. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the fridge. It was stocked. Organic milk. Fresh fruit, steaks. All bought with my money. I grabbed a carton of milk. I walked to the living room. I opened the carton and poured it all over the beige sectional sofa. My sofa. Then I went to the bedroom. I opened the closet. I found his golf shirts. The ones he wore to the Founders Invitational. I took a pair of scissors from the desk drawer. I cut the buttons off every single shirt. Just the buttons. It was petty. It was small. But it made me feel better. I checked my phone. The green dot was moving back toward the complex. He was coming back. I had to go. I grabbed the quilt. I walked to the door. I took one last look at the happy family photos on the wall. Smile while you can, I whispered to the picture of David. Because the landlord is about to raise the rent. I locked the door behind me. I took the elevator down. I got into my car and drove away just as David's Mercedes pulled into the entrance. He didn't see me. He was too busy looking at his phone, probably texting me a lie about his tea time. I drove home with my grandmother's quilt in the passenger seat. It smelled like Linda. I would have to dry clean it, twice. But I had what I needed. I knew where he was. I knew what he was doing. And I knew that I owned the roof over his head. Now, it was time to start the eviction. The drive home from the Vistas was the longest 40 minutes of my life, mostly because I had to drive with the windows down to get the smell of Linda's perfume out of my grandmother's quilt. It sat on the passenger seat next to me, a pile of soft cotton and memories that had been violated by the two people I trusted most in the world. Every time I looked at it, I felt a fresh wave of nausea, but underneath the sickness, there was something else hardening in my gut. It was the same feeling I got right before I walked into a boardroom to fire a vendor who had been skimming off the top. It was the feeling of absolute clarity. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was the execution. I pulled into my garage and closed the door, sealing myself back into the fortress I had built. I didn't go to the kitchen. I didn't go to the bedroom. I went straight to the laundry room. I threw that quilt into the washing machine, poured in 3 cups of bleach, more than the fabric could probably handle, but I didn't care. I needed it clean, and set it to the hottest, longest cycle possible. I watched the water rush in, swirling around the fabric, drowning the scent of betrayal in chemicals and heat. Then, I went to my home office. I sat down in my leather executive chair, the one David said was too masculine for a woman, but I bought anyway because it supported my back while I carried this family. I cracked my knuckles. I opened my laptop. It was time to go to work. David thought he was playing chess, but he didn't realize he was playing against the woman who owned the board. He thought he had assets. He thought he had credit. He thought he had a safety net. He was about to find out that gravity is a terrible thing when the net disappears. I started with the joint accounts. We had a primary checking account where his allowance and the household bills came out of. I logged in. The balance was healthy, sitting pretty at $45,000. I clicked transfer. I moved $44,900 into my personal, individual business account, the one he didn't even know the password to. I left him $100. Just enough to buy a tank of gas, but not enough to buy a diamond bracelet. Next, the credit cards. The American Express Platinum. The Chase Sapphire Reserve. The cards he used to flash around the clubhouse to look like a big shot. I logged into the admin portal. Since I was the primary account holder and his credit score was somewhere in the basement thanks to a bankruptcy he filed before we met, I had full administrative control. I didn't cancel the cards. Canceling them would send an immediate notification. No, I did something crueler. I lowered the credit limit. I set the limit on the Amex to $500. I set the Chase card to $200. Then, I changed the passwords. All of them. The banking login. The investment portfolio he liked to check but never contributed to. Even the Netflix password. If he wanted to watch movies with his mistress in my condo, he was going to have to pay for his own subscription. Click, save, confirm. I watched the little loading wheel spin on the screen. It was hypnotic. With every rotation, I was stripping him naked. I was taking back the clothes off his back, the food out of his mouth, the roof over his head. I was turning him back into the man he was when I met him, broke, charming, and utterly useless. But I wasn't done. The condo. The love nest. Unit 402 at the Vistas. I picked up the phone and called Sheldon again. It was late, almost 8 o'clock, but Sheldon picked up on the second ring. He knew better than to ignore a call from his biggest client after hours. Sheldon, I said, my voice calm and level. I need you to draft a document for me, tonight. Renee. Sheldon sounded tired. Can this wait until morning? I'm at dinner. No, Sheldon, it can't. It's regarding the property at the Vistas. The one owned by R&D Holdings. Okay. What about it? I need to file an eviction notice. Sheldon choked on whatever he was drinking. Eviction. Renee, the tenant is. Well, technically there is no tenant on the lease, right? It's just a corporate housing unit. Who are you evicting? I'm evicting the squatters, I said. I want a notice to quit filed for unauthorized occupants. And I want a notice of non-payment of rent. But, isn't David using it? Sheldon asked, confused. David isn't paying rent, Sheldon. The LLC requires a monthly inflow to cover the HOA fees and taxes. I checked the books. R&D Holdings hasn't received a rent payment from the occupant in 6 months. That's a violation of the corporate charter. I want them out. 3 days notice. Renee, this sounds personal. It's business, Sheldon. Strictly business. I'm liquidating underperforming assets. Draft the notice. Have a process server ready to slap it on the door of Unit 402 tomorrow morning. I want it taped right over the peephole. There was a long pause on the line. Sheldon was smart. He was putting the pieces together. He realized that the investment property wasn't an investment, and the squatter wasn't a stranger. Consider it done, he said quietly. Do you want me to name the occupants? Name Jane Doe and John Doe, I said. Let's keep it anonymous. For now. I hung up. I sat back in my chair and listened to the washing machine chugging away in the laundry room. It was a comforting sound. It sounded like cleaning. It sounded like justice. I checked the GPS tracker on my laptop. The green dot was still at the Vistas. He was probably cooking her dinner. Maybe using the groceries he bought with my money. Maybe pouring her a glass of the wine he stole from my cellar. I imagined them sitting on my beige sectional, the one I had soaked in milk, though it probably hadn't started to smell yet, laughing about how stupid I was. Laughing about the ATM. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. A picture of David popped up, a photo from our 10th anniversary in Hawaii, both of us smiling, tanned, looking happy. It felt like looking at a picture of two strangers. I let it ring 3 times. I needed to set the stage. I cleared my throat. I put a smile in my voice. I picked up. Hey, honey, I said, channeling the naive, supportive wife. How's the tournament? Are you crushing it? Nay, David said. His voice was tight, high-pitched. He sounded breathless. I have a little situation. Oh no, did you shank a drive? I asked, keeping my tone light. No, the golf is fine. Great, actually, I'm at a gas station. Near the course. I just tried to fill up the Mercedes, and the card declined. The Amex. Declined? I asked, injecting a note of shocked concern. That's impossible. I just paid the bill last week. I know. That's what I told the attendant. It's embarrassing, nay. There's a line of cars behind me. I tried the chase card too, declined. It says do not honor. Do not honor. I love that phrase. It was so fitting. That is so strange, David, I said, typing loudly on my keyboard so he could hear me working on the problem. Let me log in and see what's going on. Hold on. I waited. I let him sweat in the humid South Carolina air, or rather, the humid parking lot of a Shell station 10 minutes away from his mistress. Oh, David, I said after a long pause. I see it. The bank put a fraud alert on the account. Fraud alert? Why? Well, looking at the transaction data, it flagged a series of charges in a zip code that doesn't match your itinerary. The system thinks you're in Myrtle Beach, right? Because that's where you told me you were going. But these attempts are coming from, let me see, the west side, near the industrial park? Silence. Dead silence on the line. I could hear the traffic rushing by in the background. He was caught. He couldn't admit he wasn't in Myrtle Beach without blowing his cover. He had to think fast. Oh, yeah, he stammered. I had to take a detour. To pick up a special set of clubs. From a guy. It's a long story. But I'm definitely heading to Myrtle Beach right now. I just need gas. Right, I said. Well, the bank's security algorithm is very sensitive these days. It probably flagged the location as high risk. You know how they are. Can you fix it? He begged. Just call them and authorize the charge. I'm sitting here with the nozzle in the tank, nay. It's humiliating. I wish I could, honey, I said, sighing dramatically. But since it's a fraud lock, they have to mail a verification code to the home address. It takes 24 hours to reset. Security protocol. I can't override it from here. 24 hours. He shouted. Nay, I have zero cash on me. How am I supposed to eat? How am I supposed to check into the hotel? Hotel? I thought you already checked in. I haven't got there yet. Nay, you have to transfer me some cash. Cash at me. Or Zelle. Just send me $1,000 to get through the weekend. I smiled at the phone. Here it was. The desperation. I tried to send it earlier, babe. When I saw the alert, I lied. But because the main accounts are locked down for the fraud investigation, the transfer feature is frozen too. I can't move a dime until Monday. Monday. I'm so sorry, David. It's a mess. I'll go down to the branch first thing tomorrow and scream at them, I promise. But for tonight, you might have to improvise. Don't you have any cash? No. I spent it on the clubs. He didn't have clubs. He had spent it on the diamond bracelet for Linda. Well, surely your golf buddies can spot you, I suggested. You're with the guys, right? Just ask Mike or Steve to cover your dinner. You can pay them back next week. Another silence. He wasn't with Mike or Steve. He was alone, 20 minutes away from his secret family, with a gas tank running on fumes and a credit card that was nothing more than a plastic scraper. Yeah, he muttered. Yeah, I'll ask the guys. It's just embarrassing, you know? Being the guy whose card declines. I know, honey, I said soothingly. It's terrible. But look at the bright side. At least you have your health. And you have me, right? I'm working on it. I'll fix it. I always fix everything. Yeah, he said, his voice hollow. You do. Thanks. Nay. I gotta go. He hung up. I set the phone down on the desk. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I imagined him standing at that gas pump. He would have to go inside and tell the attendant he couldn't pay. He would have to leave his driver's license as collateral just to drive away. He would have to drive back to the condo, empty-handed. No milk. No diapers. No dinner. Linda was going to be furious. She was expecting a provider. She was expecting a man who could take care of her. Instead, she was getting a man who couldn't even buy a gallon of unleaded. And tomorrow morning, when they woke up hungry and cranky, they would hear a knock on the door. Not a delivery man with breakfast. A process server with an eviction notice. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun had gone down. The world outside was dark. But inside my house, things were clearer than they had ever been. I wasn't just cutting him off. I was teaching him a lesson. He wanted to live a double life? Fine. But he was going to learn that double lives cost double the money. And his line of credit had just been revoked. I went downstairs to the laundry room. The washer buzzed, signaling the cycle was done. I pulled the quilt out. It smelled like bleach and nothing else. It was clean. It was faded, the colors a little washed out, but the stain of Linda was gone. I carried it upstairs. I was going to sleep well tonight. David, on the other hand, was about to have a very long, very uncomfortable weekend. And the best part, he still thought I was on his side. He still thought I was the clueless wife trying to help him fix a bank error. He had no idea that the error was him. The club championship dinner was always the crown jewel of the social calendar at the Rolling Hills Country Club, a night where the air smelled of expensive perfume, prime rib, and the desperate need for validation. I walked into the ballroom wearing a dress that cost more than David's car, a shimmering, gold floor-length gown that fit like a second skin and caught every light in the room. I had my hair done, my makeup flawless, and my grandmother's emerald ring on my finger. I looked like a queen. I looked like a trophy. I looked like exactly what David needed me to be to distract everyone from the fact that his credit cards were currently as useful as drink coasters. David was already there, standing by the open bar, which I knew he was hitting hard because it was the only thing he didn't have to swipe a card for. He looked tired. The weekend at the condo hadn't been the relaxing getaway he planned. I knew, because I had received the notification from the process server that the eviction notice had been taped to the door of Unit 402 on Saturday morning. I knew, because the GPS tracker showed him driving back and forth between the condo and pawn shops, likely trying to sell his watch to buy groceries since I had cut off the cash flow. He looked thinner, his tan a little sallow, his smile a little too tight. But when he saw me, relief washed over his face like a tidal wave. He hurried over, grabbing my arm a little too hard. "Nay," he whispered, leaning in so he wouldn't be overheard by the club president standing nearby. "Thank God you're here. Did you fix the bank stuff? I've been dodging the waiter all night. I can't even tip the valet." "Relax, honey," I said, patting his hand with a gloved calm. "Everything is handled. Tonight is about you. It's your big night. You won the senior scramble, didn't you? Enjoy it." He exhaled, his shoulders dropping. "You're the best, seriously. I don't know what I'd do without you." "I know," I said. "I know exactly what you'd do without me, David. You'd starve." He laughed, thinking I was joking. He didn't see the shark swimming in my eyes. We mingled. We shook hands. We played the part of the power couple. And then, I saw her, Linda. She was sitting at a table in the back, wearing a black dress that was a little too short for a black tie event, looking nervous. She wasn't a member, obviously. She was there as a guest of one of David's golf buddies, a cover story they had probably cooked up 100 times. She caught my eye and gave a little wave, a hesitant, fearful gesture. She didn't know if I knew. She knew the money had stopped. She knew about the eviction notice on the door of the love nest, but she didn't know if I was the one pulling the strings or if it was just bad luck. She was gambling that I was still the clueless ATM. Dinner was served. I sat next to David at the head table. I ate my salad. I drank my water. I watched him down 3 glasses of Cabernet. He was getting loose. He was getting confident again. He thought he had survived the weekend. He thought the storm had passed. Then, the club president took the stage. He tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed. "If I could have your attention. We have a few awards to hand out tonight. First up, for the winner of the Senior Scramble and our Member of the Year, Mr. David Thompson." Applause erupted. David stood up, beaming. He buttoned his jacket. He walked up to the stage, shook the president's hand, and accepted a shiny brass trophy that probably cost $50. He waved to the crowd. He looked at me. "Speech." Someone shouted from the back. David laughed. Oh, I didn't prepare anything. Actually, I said, standing up. My voice cut through the room. I wasn't shouting, but I projected with the authority of a woman who addresses union halls. I prepared something. The room went quiet. David looked confused, but he gestured for me to come up. My lovely wife, everyone. The real boss. There was polite laughter. I walked up the steps. I took the microphone from his hand. I stood next to him. I smiled at the crowd. I smiled at Linda in the back row. David is too humble, I began, my voice warm and affectionate. He wouldn't tell you how hard he works. He wouldn't tell you about the long hours he spends away from home. He wouldn't tell you about the sacrifices he makes. David was nodding, looking proud. He thought I was praising him. I wanted to do something special for him tonight, I continued. To show everyone the real David Thompson. So, I put together a little slideshow. A tribute to his extracurricular activities. I pointed to the AV booth. I had tipped the tech guy $100 earlier to load my flash drive. Hit it, Mike. The lights dimmed. The giant projection screen behind us flickered to life. David turned to look, expecting photos of his golf swing. Expecting memories of our vacations. The first image popped up. It was huge. 10 feet tall. It was the lock screen of the burner phone. The photo of Linda kissing the baby. There was a ripple of confusion in the room. People squinted. Is that Linda? Someone whispered. David froze. He looked at the screen, then at me. His face went gray. Who is that beautiful baby? I asked into the microphone, my voice dripping with faux curiosity. And why is my best friend holding him like that? David, do you know who this baby is? Nay, what are you doing? David hissed, reaching for the mic. I stepped away, keeping the microphone out of his reach. Next slide, Mike. The screen changed. It was a screenshot of a text message. Sender, wifey number 2. Message, did you get away from the ATM yet? We need milk and diapers. A gasp went through the room. It was audible. A collective intake of breath from 200 of the city's wealthiest gossips. The ATM, I read aloud. That's a cute nickname, isn't it? I wonder who the ATM is. Could it be the woman who pays the mortgage? The woman who pays the club dues? The woman who paid for the suit you're wearing right now? David lunged for me. Turn it off. Turn it off right now. Security, I said calmly into the mic. 2 of the bouncers I had hired, Mr. Graves' men, stepped out from the wings of the stage. They blocked David. He bounced off the chest of a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. We aren't done yet, I said. Next slide. The screen changed again. This time, it was a bank statement. Side by side with the Cash App history. Withdrawal, $2,000, car repairs. Transfer to Linda, $2,000, nursery furniture. Withdrawal, $5,000, country club assessment. Transfer to Linda, $5,000, rent at the Vistas. Look at those numbers, I said, pointing at the screen like a professor teaching a class. It's amazing how they match up, isn't it? It's almost like embezzlement. But it's not embezzlement, is it, David? It's paternity support. Linda stood up in the back. She was shaking. She tried to run for the door, but the crowd was too dense. People were turning in their chairs, staring at her. She was trapped in the spotlight of her own shame. And just in case anyone is wondering, I said, reaching into my clutch purse. In case anyone thinks I'm just a jealous woman making things up. I pulled out a piece of paper. I have the receipt. Or rather, the results. I held up the DNA test. Last Sunday, while Linda was eating my pot roast and drinking my wine, I managed to snag a pacifier that fell on the floor. I ran a rapid DNA test against a hair sample from David's hairbrush. I looked at David. He was slumped against the podium, defeated, his hands covering his face. The probability of paternity is 99.9%, I announced. David is the father. Linda is the mother. And I. I am the financier. The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear David's heavy breathing. I turned to look at him. I walked close, so only he and the microphone could hear me. You thought I was stupid, David. You thought because I loved you, I was blind. You thought you could live two lives on one income, my income. But you forgot one thing. You forgot who balances the books. I looked out at the crowd. I saw the shock, the pity, the glee on their faces. They would be talking about this for 20 years. I'm retiring from the shipping business, David, I said. And effective immediately, I am retiring from the husband business. I'm freezing the assets. I'm selling the house. I'm evicting your mistress from the condo I own. And you? I reached into my pocket and pulled out his titanium iPhone. The real one. You can have this back. Good luck paying the bill. I dropped the phone on the floor. It cracked. You and your real wife can figure out how to pay the check tonight, I said. Because the ATM is out of order. I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening thud that echoed through the speakers, a final punctuation mark on 25 years of marriage. I walked off the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I didn't look left. I didn't look right. I walked straight toward the exit. As I passed Linda, she shrunk back, covering her face with her hands. I stopped for just a second. He's all yours, Lynn, I whispered. I hope you like him broke. I walked out of the ballroom, past the stunned valet, and out into the cool night air. My convertible was waiting. Top down. I got in. I started the engine. I drove away from the country club, leaving the chaos, the shame, and the dead weight of a lying husband in my rearview mirror. I had lost a husband. I had lost a best friend. But as the wind whipped through my hair, I realized I had found something much more valuable. I had found my freedom. And it tasted expensive. The fallout from the club championship dinner wasn't a divorce, it was a demolition. You might think that after a public humiliation like that, David would have slinked away into the shadows to lick his wounds, but arrogance is a stubborn weed. He tried to fight. He actually tried to fight me. 2 days after I left him standing on that stage with a cracked phone and a ruined reputation, he had the nerve to have a lawyer call me. Not a good lawyer, mind you, because he couldn't afford one anymore, but some strip mall ambulance chaser who probably worked on contingency. He demanded alimony. He demanded half the business. He demanded lifestyle maintenance because he had become accustomed to a certain standard of living during our marriage. I sat in Sheldon's office, listening to this nonsense on speakerphone, and I didn't even get angry. I just laughed. It was a deep, belly-shaking laugh that felt like a detox. I let Sheldon handle it. My prenup wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a fortress. It had an infidelity clause, sure, but it also had a financial malfeasance clause. By embezzling funds from our joint accounts to support a secret family, David hadn't just broken his vows, he had broken the contract. He had pierced the corporate veil of our marriage. Sheldon laid it out for them in black and white. If David pushed for a single dime, we would file criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft regarding the R&D Holdings LLC. We would put him in prison. The lawsuit was dropped the next morning. David signed the papers. He walked away with nothing but his personal effects and a golf bag full of shame. As for Linda, the romance didn't survive the reality check. It's easy to be in love when you're meeting for secret lunches at a country club and spending someone else's money on diamond bracelets. It's a lot harder to be in love when you're getting evicted from your luxury condo and your boyfriend is asking you for gas money. I heard through the grapevine, because this town is small and people love to talk, that the happy family imploded before the ink was even dry on the eviction notice. Linda realized she hadn't won a prize, she had won a dependent. She had stolen a man who had no skills, no job history in a decade, and no access to cash. She kicked him out within a month. She moved back in with her mother, telling everyone who would listen that David had deceived her about his finances. I guess the grass wasn't greener on the other side, it was just spray-painted dirt. The next 6 months were a reclamation project. I didn't just divorce David, I purged him. I sold the house. I couldn't stay there. Every room had a memory, and every memory felt like a lie. I bought a sleek, modern penthouse downtown, something with floor-to-ceiling windows and zero yard work. I sold the Mercedes. I sold the golf clubs I found in the garage. I donated his clothes to a charity shop, not a fancy one, but the one on the other side of the tracks. I wanted him to have to work to find a decent shirt. I threw myself into the business. We expanded our fleet. We opened a new distribution center in Atlanta. I worked hard, but it was different this time. I wasn't working to support a leech. I was working for me. I was building a legacy that would actually last, not one that would cheat on me with my best friend. I started traveling, real travel, not just business trips. I went to Italy. I went to Japan. I drank wine that I bought with my own money in cities where no one knew my name. I healed. It wasn't a straight line. There were nights I cried. There were nights I missed the friendship I thought I had with Linda. But every morning, I woke up in a bed that was mine, in a life that was honest, and that feeling was worth every tear. Then came a Tuesday in April. It was one of those perfect spring days where the sky is a piercing blue and the air smells like blooming dogwood. I was driving my convertible, the one I bought the day after the dinner, with the top down, heading to a site inspection near the municipal airport. The route took me past the public golf course. You know the one. The one with the chain-link fence, the patchy grass, and the clubhouse that serves hot dogs on paper plates. I hit a red light right in front of the entrance. I looked over, just idly watching the golfers trudge toward the parking lot. And then I saw him. It was David. He was walking toward a beat-up sedan, a car that looked like it had survived a demolition derby. He wasn't wearing his pressed polos or his cashmere sweaters. He was wearing a faded t-shirt and cargo shorts. And he was carrying his own bag. That black leather bag with the gold monogram looked ridiculous now, battered and scuffed, slung over the shoulder of a man who looked 20 years older than the last time I saw him. He looked tired. He looked heavy. He looked like a man who had learned the hard way that gravity applies to everyone. He stopped at his trunk. He fumbled with his keys. And then, he looked up. He saw me. He saw the convertible. He saw the designer sunglasses. He saw the glow of a woman who had shed 200 pounds of dead weight. Our eyes locked across the intersection. I didn't look away. I didn't scowl. I didn't give him the finger, even though a part of me wanted to. I just looked at him. I let him see me. I let him see exactly what he had thrown away for a cheap thrill and a second phone. I saw his shoulders slump. I saw the regret wash over his face, plain as day. He took a half step toward the street, like he was going to wave, or maybe try to shout something. Maybe he was going to ask for money. Maybe he was going to say sorry. But the light turned green. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the gas. The engine roared, a beautiful, powerful sound. I left him there in the exhaust fumes, standing in the parking lot of a cheap public course, holding on to a bag full of clubs he could no longer afford to use. I drove away, the wind whipping through my hair, and I started to laugh. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a joyful one. It was the sound of a ledger finally balancing out. He thought the grass was greener on the other side. He thought he could have his cake and eat it too, as long as I paid for the bakery. But he forgot the most important rule of business and of life. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, because that hand can also close the wallet, lock the door, and drive away in a convertible. I checked my rearview mirror one last time. David was just a speck in the distance, getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. I turned up the radio. I had a meeting to get to. I had a business to run. And for the first time in 25 years, I was driving toward a future that belonged entirely to me.